The neighbors hadn't seen her in weeks. But they weren't worried. She was quiet, lived alone, and kept to herself. Until the smell started. Faint at first, like something spoiled. But it grew stronger, day by day, leaking into the hallway of their small apartment complex. No one knew what to expect when police were called. Maybe a gas leak. Maybe she'd fallen, unable to get up. But what they found inside her apartment left even the most seasoned officers completely speechless. There, in the center of her living room, was a full-sized coffin. Closed, perfectly polished, sitting like a piece of furniture between her TV and the couch. But there was no funeral. No obituary. No reported death. Just one woman, living alone in a coffin she claimed had been there for some time now. When officers asked her what was inside, she just smiled. And when they opened it, well, let's just say this story only gets stranger from here. Every now and then, a story surfaces that shakes an entire city to its core. Not because it's loud, not because it's violent, but because of the quiet horror that lives beneath the surface. This isn't a story about gang wars, robberies, or dramatic car chases. No, this is something far more personal, more unsettling, and far harder to explain. Because this isn't just about a murder, it's about a twisted obsession, a haunting betrayal, and a woman who disappeared long before anyone noticed she was gone. The story involves a quiet neighborhood, a woman with no enemies, and a man who many believed was a spiritual leader, a respected figure in his community. But beneath his charm and charisma was a secret so chilling, so methodical it would take detectives months to uncover the full truth. So grab your headphones, sit back, and whatever you do, don't listen to this in the dark. This is the story of the pastor, the police, and the woman in the coffin. To the people who knew her, her name was Tina. Just Tina. A soft-spoken woman who blended into her environment so seamlessly, most people wouldn't notice if she passed by. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. In fact, that was what made her so unforgettable to those who truly paid attention. She had this quiet strength, the kind of presence that didn't shout, but settled in your memory long after she left the room. She lived in Abuja, Nigeria's political capital, a city full of ambition, power, and secrets. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Until the wrong man stepped into it. That man was someone people looked up to. A man who led prayers on Sunday, who gave advice to young couples, who laid hands on the sick and spoke of spiritual healing. His name, Pastor Ugochukwu Emmanuel. Now listen, this wasn't your average church leader. Ugochukwu had charisma. He had the kind of smile that could light up a room and eyes that told people what they wanted to hear. Greater than, but behind the holy words and tailored suits was something else. Something he kept hidden. And unfortunately, Tina had already stepped too far into his world to walk away. But it wasn't just Ugochukwu. There was someone else involved. Someone who wore a uniform, carried a badge, and swore to protect the same people he silently betrayed. Inspector Francis, a police officer, a trusted friend to many. But this story, it will force you to question what you think you know about law, order, and loyalty. So how did their paths cross? Why Tina? Why now? Why her? Let's rewind to the moment that changed everything. It started like a whisper. A text unanswered. A phone call that rang and rang, but no one picked up. Then a day passed. Then two. And suddenly, Tina, the same Tina who never missed a church program, who always called her mother back, had vanished. At first, some thought maybe she traveled. Maybe she was taking a break. Abuja can be draining, after all. But her mother, she knew something was wrong. Deep in her bones, she felt it. That cold, awful feeling only mothers understand. So she called. She asked. She begged anyone who would listen. And eventually, the rumors started. Tina was last seen at the pastor's house. People talked in hushed voices, trying not to be heard. After all, who wants to accuse a man of God? But the whispers grew louder. Some said she had gone there late at night. Others said she had been helping with some private church arrangements. No one really knew, but the timeline was tight. The pieces were fitting too well. The moment she walked into Pastor Ugochukwu's home was the moment she stopped existing in the outside world. So where was Tina? Calls were made. Eventually, the police got involved. And in a move that shocked everyone, one of the lead officers on the case was none other than Inspector Francis. Yes, The same Francis who was rumored to be very close to the pastor. Now pause. Think about that. The person supposed to find Tina might have been helping cover up what happened to her. And then, 1 week after her disappearance, something unexpected happened. Pastor Ugochukwu walked into the police station. Alone. Calm. Composed. But the words he spoke would change everything. "I want to confess," he said. "There's something I need to say about the girl. There are some moments you don't forget, the way a room falls silent when something sacred breaks." That's exactly what happened inside that Abuja police station when Pastor Ugochukwu opened his mouth. He sat down. No lawyers. No fuss. Just him and the air-conditioned chill of guilt hanging thick around him. He looked at the officer across the table and said the words no one expected to hear. "She's dead. I killed her." Silence. Not even a pen scratch. Not even the hum of the fluorescent lights. Nothing. The man they all saw as a shepherd, the one who prayed over their children, laid hands on the sick, gave fiery sermons on Sundays, just confessed to murder. And as if that wasn't enough, he kept going. He talked about Tina, how she came to see him. How something happened. Something he wouldn't explain fully. 1 second, he said they argued. The next, he said she slipped. Then he changed it again, claimed it was self-defense. Then, out of nowhere, he said she tempted him. His story was full of cracks, inconsistencies, weak lies wrapped in holy words. But it was what he said next that sent real chills. "I wasn't alone," he whispered. "The inspector helped me." Boom. Like thunder in the middle of a church service. He named Inspector Francis, the same man in charge of the investigation, as his accomplice. He said Francis helped him cover the body. Helped move it. Helped silence the noise. And just like that, this wasn't just a case of a killer pastor. It was now a web of corruption, deceit and betrayal from the very people meant to uphold the law. But here's the craziest part, that confession was just the beginning. Because the body, it still hadn't been found. And without a body, there's no murder charge strong enough to stick. So the question still hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Where was Tina? And more importantly, would they ever find her before the whole thing got buried by power and politics? They say evil hides in plain sight. And sometimes, the truth doesn't scream, it whispers, buried 6 feet beneath the feet of the innocent. When Pastor Ugochukwu mentioned the backyard, something shifted. Not just in the room, but in the air. In the eyes of the officers. Even the walls felt tighter. The confession wasn't enough. Words are slippery. They vanish. But the soil, the earth doesn't lie. So a special task force was assembled. No local men. No one connected to Inspector Francis. These were outsiders. Cold, detached, and thorough. They arrived at the church compound early in the morning, not for service, but for truth. Cameras stayed off. Phones confiscated. Only shovels, scanners, dogs and silence. The pastor's backyard was bigger than most would expect. A garden. Some banana trees. A rusted fence line. But it was the far left corner behind an old water tank where one of the dogs started barking and refused to stop. They dug. In layers. Like peeling back the sins of a man, one shovel at a time. And then the smell hit them. Not of decay, but of death pretending to be forgotten. Wrapped in plastic. Tied with rope. Pressed deep into the mud. A woman's body. Hands bruised. Neck twisted. The face barely recognizable, but enough for her family to confirm. Tina. Gone, but now, finally found. And with her discovery, everything changed. Headlines exploded. Popular pastor found with body in backyard. Faith was replaced by fear. Church members wept. Some denied it. Others claimed spiritual attack. A few whispered, he was always strange. But the ugliest part wasn't even the body. It was what was found next. In a locked storage room beneath the church basement. A diary. Old. Worn. Filled with names. Dates. Confessions. Some weren't even Tina's. Which begged the question, was this Pastor Ugochukwu's first time? Or just the first time he got caught? And was Inspector Francis involved in more than just one cover-up? The discovery of Tina's body opened a door that couldn't be shut again. And what waited behind that door was darker than anyone could have expected. Truth doesn't hide forever. Sometimes, it waits until the right hands turn the wrong key. Inside the church basement, beneath dusty chairs and broken speakers, they found it. A rusted metal cabinet, double-locked, wedged behind old plywood sheets. Hidden in plain sight, the pastor's personal archive, what looked like a pile of useless documents quickly unraveled into something darker, deeper. First, the files were labeled not with names, but with initials. T.J. A.O. R.N. M. B. Dozens of them. Each file contained handwritten notes, time stamps, phone numbers, receipts. Some had photos, and not just photos of people alive. Some of the pictures showed faces that never made it home. Tina's file was the thickest. Inside, her name appeared over and over. Dates of when she arrived at the church, when she started, special counseling sessions, when she confided in the pastor about her troubled marriage. Then the page stopped. No date of death, just a scribbled word, cleansed. The police didn't understand what that meant until they found the other files. One name kept appearing alongside many others. Inspector Francis. Some documents had initials matched with monetary figures. Amounts withdrawn. Services rendered. A chilling note at the bottom of one page read, "Ensure silence. Use pressure if needed. Francis will assist." It was no longer just about Tina. This was bigger, more layered. A network protected by a badge and a pulpit. A few envelopes even had pictures of community members in compromising situations. Blackmail. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why victims never came forward. Why Francis was always the one assigned to the church. Why anyone who raised their voice seemed to vanish into silence. What Pastor Ugochukwu had built wasn't just a church. It was a machine. A well-oiled operation of manipulation, abuse and cover-ups. And now, that machine was exposed. But exposure wasn't enough. The public wanted justice. And that justice would begin in a courtroom packed with reporters, victims' families, and a nation staring at the man they once called God's messenger. The courthouse was overflowing. Outside, news vans lined the street. Journalists, locals, and protesters gathered with signs that read, "Justice for Tina, Unholy Secrets," and "No More Silence." For the first time, Pastor Ugochukwu and Inspector Francis stood side by side, not on the altar or in uniform but in cuffs. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. You could hear a pin drop as the charges were read aloud. Countless counts of abuse of power, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, blackmail, and accessory to murder. Tina's family sat in the front row. Her sister held a framed photo. Her mother wept quietly. The prosecution began with one question. How many voices were silenced so these two men could thrive in the dark? Then came the files laid out for the jury. One by one, the courtroom gasped as images of victims flashed across the projector. Dozens of witnesses testified. Former church members, survivors, even a retired officer who admitted he once warned Francis about the pastor, but was transferred days later. Inspector Francis broke first. After hours of questioning and mounting evidence, he finally cracked. "Yes, I protected him. We had a deal. I thought we were saving people." He muttered this while avoiding the gaze of Tina's sister. Then came the moment the entire nation waited for. Pastor Ugochukwu took the stand. With cold calmness, he looked around the courtroom, then said, "I was doing the Lord's work. Not everyone understands God's calling." Gasps and whispers ripple through the room. The judge leaned forward. What about Tina? Was her death part of that calling? The pastor remained silent. No tears. No apology. Just silence. But the silence was louder than words. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the foreperson stood and read the verdict. Guilty. On all counts. Cheers outside. Weeping inside. The sentence. Life imprisonment without parole. Francis received 25 years. But for many, no sentence would ever be enough to bring Tina back. Still, her story sparked something powerful. A wave of survivors across the country began to speak out. Churches re-evaluated their leadership. Police departments faced public pressure to clean up their ranks. Tina was gone, but her voice finally echoed. And that echo, it changed everything. They say the dead can't speak. But sometimes, their silence screams louder than words. Tina's story wasn't just a crime tale, it was a wake-up call. She was a girl with dreams, with laughter, with a future stolen by those who were meant to protect her. A pastor who used his pulpit as a mask. A police officer who traded justice for loyalty. And a system that failed to listen until it was too late. But from her, Death came movement. Victims who were once afraid now found courage in her name. Communities that once turned away, now demand answers. And in churches, on streets, across social media, her name lives on. Tina. Tina. This is not just her story, it's a warning. A reminder. A call for change. Because evil thrives in silence until someone dares to speak. And even in death, Tina dared. Justice is not vengeance. It's truth finally heard.